in the lives of Christian leaders is because of what they do when they're alone.
Yes, sir.
When they are anonymous, when they can be online or go to a theater or whatever it is. We are more at risk alone, and we're more supported and helped when we're together. So I think that that is a valid biblical basis in support of triad or group coaching, because it brings many people together. One of my D.Min students is an online vocational teacher. He teaches for a variety of colleges on the West Coast and throughout the South and so forth. And we talk a little bit about what is good about online classes versus face-to-face classes. And there are pros and cons to online schools. Those that are online will tend to talk about things that they won't talk about face-to-face. People will say things online and via email and in chat rooms that they won't say face-to-face. So it does draw some things out. But there is something about coaching over the phone, coaching over the internet, but there's something about looking somebody in the eye, and there's something about looking somebody in the eye when others are observing, what's going on. And so if you think about something that Brian gave us previously out of Bob Logan's book, I think it's in Coaching 101, that dissatisfaction plus vision plus first steps leads to change. In our coaching relationship, we can help uncover what a coachee is dissatisfied about. We can help them articulate their vision that they want it to be better. And we can talk about first steps, but there's something about the positive peer pressure when others are involved in helping people get going. When I was a fluid power design engineer, I read the books and I computed some things that did not work very well. And then I realized that it takes more torque, it takes more power to get something started moving than to keep it moving. And so I learned quickly as an engineer that starting torque, starting power, overcoming friction, getting momentum up and running, that it takes more effort to get something moving sometimes. And what I have found is that group coaching or triad coaching is more effective in many cases and in many ways. So my personal preferred way of coaching is to do a combination of the above. I enjoy coaching over the phone. I do that because my personality and my temperament, my willingness to have dead space and dead time and not having visual distractions. I take copious notes most of the time when I coach. I love doing telephone coaching. I also enjoy the face-to-face, but I really enjoy the triad coaching. And so for me, I would prefer out of 5 coaching sessions to do 3 in triads, 1 face-to-face, and 1 over the phone, because there are strengths and weaknesses, and we'll talk about that as we wrap up this section in a little bit. But essentially, we're looking for anything and everything that we can do, as Brian just talked about, to lead to change. And to lead to change, these initial first steps that they keep doing. It's one thing for a person to say yes to one person, and then it's easy to come back and say, I really didn't keep doing it. It's a little harder for someone to say yes in the presence of multiple people, and then come back in front of multiple people and say, I've been slackered, I have not followed through on what I said I would do. And so there are many reasons why I think triad coaching can be effective. I gave you this little handout that shows the mentor. It doesn't say coach, but pretend it says coach. And instead of saying the leader, pretend it says coachee, because that's just the diagram that we have. If you look at the solid black lines, it shows that without triad coaching, if it's just one-to-one, then you have the mentor or the coach to the leader or coachee as going one-on-one in that regard. However, if you bring these people together, you have people listening in on one another, all of a sudden you have more lines of connection and lines of communication. So it's not just that you have more people telling you you ought to do this, or asking you, why don't you do this? But you have a greater sense of engagement, a greater sense of connection. You're part of a little bit of a community, even though it's a coaching kind of a dynamic and relationship. So you have greater engagement, you have greater connection, and one of the things that I have found valuable is you have differing perspectives, people saying the same thing. We talked earlier, and we just demonstrated in the last session on change, that people resist change in part due to their culture. And I found that when I'm coaching a church planter or coaching a pastor, that if he agrees that something needs to change, and it's one-on-one, and I send him back to his church or to his plant, then it's a little harder for him to be effective if he says, you know, one person encouraged me and suggested that I do this, versus, you know, I met with some other guys, and there was a group of guys that were in on this conversation that said this is the right thing to do. There's something about multiple people being involved. And consider what Jesus said. Wherever two or more of you are gathered, I am there in some different manifest way. Now, I can't get my head around that. I either have all of Jesus or I don't have Jesus. But there's some manifest presence of Jesus when multiple people are together. I don't know how many people need to be together for us to get more and more of this manifest presence. All I know is that the more of God's people that are together, going the same direction, excited about the same thing, the more encouraging it is for me to continue. So there's some real value in this triad coaching. And so I kind of discovered this as a D-Min mentor and supervisor for Golden Gate Seminary. I had too many candidates and not enough time or energy, so I got permission from the D-Min director and said, instead of meeting one-on-one, can I meet with these guys once a month as a group? I think it'd be a good dynamic for them, and it just went over really, really well, so that now I strongly prefer, as a D-Min mentor, meeting with multiple candidates instead of one. So this works for me, and it may not work as well for you, but I've seen it work among Koreans, and I've seen it work among Russians, and so I'm just kind of convinced, even in Chinese, I'm convinced that this is a very effective method. So what it is simply, you still have to have the coach or the leader of leaders. Someone has to set the agenda and the pace. Someone needs to be recognized that this is the guy who is with us and in charge of us. And yet he has to create an environment where others can participate in the conversations as well. Yes?
How the group is created? Is it spontaneous or something that you agree beforehand?
Well, I think that you enlist people and you try it out. Brian has reminded us today what we learned in Coaching 1, that you try a coaching relationship for 3 to 6 months. You need to try something long enough for it to become less awkward and more comfortable. Too many times we try something once or twice and say that didn't work, but we didn't try it long enough to get over the awkwardness of it. So you don't want to make it, so long, but you need to do it long enough to see if it will work for your personality, your style of coaching. And so if you have guys that have similar issues, whether it be, they're all fresh in America, or they all speak English well, or they don't speak English well, or they're in a similar stage of life, there should be some alignment kind of issues. And so I think it's valuable and helpful if every member of the triad, while everyone's different, that there be enough natural alignment there that guys feel good about it all. I remember one triad that I did, it was 3 guys and myself. We had an older seasoned guy, we had a middle-aged guy, and a younger guy. And the younger guy, it took him a while before he realized how aligned he was with the older guy. But once you realize that, it just fit really well and it meshed well. So,
Wow.
that was good. And in fact, Steve, over here, is a part of a pastor peer group that wasn't quite a triad. We had like 5 guys there at a particular church. And one guy was asking me to coach him. I said, why don't we turn this into a group experience and let me lead, this group. What was your experience, Steve, in this? It wasn't quite a triad, but it was the same principles of a triad, of us meeting at Martha Lake for those months that I was there and leading that. What did you get from that and from one another that you maybe did not get in the same way from me personally?
I think in a setting where you have just more than one-to-one relationship, it creates a definite less burden on you, because in any setting there's a one-to-one, you feel 50% of the burden of conversations on you, but when you have multiple people, you're comfortable remaining silent and observing. So that when you have that ambience or that comfort zone, then I think you become even more engaging and more comfortable expressing, communicating with one another. It also opens up a multiple spectrum, like the perspective of things. Even when you're talking about a certain subject, usually it becomes two-dimensional, but when you have third or fourth person, it just, the peripheral just widens all of a sudden, and you begin to observe and see things that you never even thought about. And so it creates, I think there's a lot of creative elements to there, helping you to be more humbler, because no matter how no matter how much you respect the individual, your coach or mentor, when you hear it, when you're one-to-one, it becomes more like his view versus my point of view, and sharing that. But when you have more people, it creates, I think for me, was a humility, because there was other consensus that was developing, and I felt more like there's just really work of Holy Spirit guiding and leading us through our leader there. Just different dynamic.
Thank you, Steve. Again, remember, my role in your coaching training has been to bless an overview to show the role of coaching in church planning, to show that we have this multifaceted support system that's a coach and a supervisor, a mentor, and a catalyst. We orbit around people to help and support them. And so the same concept of our unusually effective and high success rate of church planters that survive is because we have multiple people appropriately supporting and encouraging. And this is kind of a carrying out of that same concept and that same principle. We want to help people recognize where they can get better. We don't want them to feel bad about themselves, but we all can improve. There's areas of dissatisfaction. We want a vision, a picture of God's preferred future in that area of their life. And we want them to take enough of the first step so that there is momentum. One of the things that I found about the weaknesses in my own ministry in the past is that by God's grace, I am really, really good about generating initial momentum. Get something moving, get it moving in the right direction, and get it up to a pretty decent speed. And one of the weaknesses of my ministry in the past is that I did not stay with it long enough so that it became self-sustaining momentum. Okay? It's one thing for first steps, but there also needs really to be enough steps so that the chains, the steps are continuing, that there's enough momentum. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is that momentum can continue even though the person is no longer there. It
Yeah,
can be like
there comes a point, excuse me, there comes a point in changes and habits that I do something often enough and long enough that it's sort of starting to become second nature. In fact, basic psychological and personality studies used to be that if you did something new every day for about 3 weeks, then you were more likely than not to continue with that new habit or that new behavior. I don't know that that's still true in this world that is so fast-paced with so many things going on. But there is some tipping point where I really need a formal level of support, and coaching is a good way of doing that. I don't need to be told what to do. I need to be helped to discover it, and then I need it to be reinforced, and reinforced enough that it affects change. Now, here's one of the issues that we're facing. You have all seen from me at one time or another, at least most of you have, the picture of the bell curve of the life cycle of an organization. And you have the time that something is born, you have the times of setting goals and growth and structure, and then you come to periods of decline, and then difficulty, and then death. And what we teach in our church revitalization is that coaching is most effective beginning before the birth and continuing along the spectrum until it gets to some point that it is less effective. So coaching is more effective from the beginning, even before birth, and until you start having some serious issues. We've also found that in terms of consultations and mentors, mentors tend to be more effective, partway into it and during the time that is difficult. So coaching is here, consulting and mentoring is here, and then we have found that an intervention is most effective here. In other words, things have gotten so bad that we're no longer suggesting or asking what you should do. We're now saying, if you don't do this, you're dead. So that's just general organizational theory that holds true in nonprofits and churches as well. So again, this generally speaking is coaching. This is more mentoring and consulting, and this is intervention. So different things, I think the same principles hold true in different ways in working with coachees. And here's my opinion. It's just according to the Gospel of Ron Shepherd, okay? That this might represent one-on-one coaching. And this might represent triad coaching. Now, it's just my opinion and my experience with things, that during the more important times and when things begin to get in trouble, that the triad is more effective in some ways than the one-on-one coaching. Now, there are exceptions. I'm talking in broad generalities, and I'm speaking from the perspective of Nigerians and Ukrainians and Russians and Koreans and Hispanics and Chinese and Filipinos in particular, and Asian Indians. In other words, I have seen triad coaching work, and I have seen this kind of a perspective with churches and helping individuals work cross-culturally in homelands and people transplanted here in rural areas and in urban contexts. Now, how much of that is just how it works in my life, I can't say. All I can say is that I have had extensive conversations with Christian Schwartz in Germany, and I've had extensive conversations with Bob Logan, who's kind of the grandfather of coaching, and that I've listened to a lot of really smart people, and everything that I've heard kind of affirms that this is true about church life, and it's true about coaching guys. So my case is, don't just do triad coaching. Don't just do it because you can get more done with less time. It takes more effort to do triad coaching than to do one-on-one. But for the sake of those that are in some level of personal or ministry or church plateau and in decline, I think it's worth the extra effort. If you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with others. And so if someone's impatient, they won't necessarily be as excited about paying the price to drive further, to take more time, to listen when they want to talk, etc., etc., etc. But they probably are more likely of turning things around and starting another life cycle from my perspective. And so again, there are strengths and there are weaknesses, and I'd like to hear back from you a little bit about what I've shared first, and then I'd like for us to talk about some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses of triad coaching. So first, do you feel like you're grasping what I'm saying? Am I communicating with you about what triad coaching is in a broad and general sense? Are you kind of grasping the interplay between the coach working with multiple coachees and the coachees interacting with one another?
I have a doubt. You, as a coach, are the one who set up your group, or you propose to different people, would you like to join us, or is the person, the coachee, that the one that asks you to be part of the group? So I would like to be coached in a group. So how does it work?
I have done it multiple ways.
Okay.
I've taken this approach when I led an officers group at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego for a year. I've taken this approach with Steve and some of his peers. Actually, it was with Jason, who said, let's do this. He contacted him. I've taken the initiative at different times. So I don't think there's any one way to do it. It's just however it naturally forms for you.
Or maybe you are in a one-to-one session and you just realize that it would be better for that person,
Right.
and you suggest
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, that's how Steve's group formed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
How does the concept of this hit you? Does this make sense to you? You feel like you kind of understand what I've tried to say?
It looks more clear to me, and make a difference between what the coaching process is and what it is, and what is a mentor and what is an intervention. So I was confused about it, so this graphic just clarified it.
And keep in mind that a coach is not necessarily an expert. It's a humble, godly, prayerful, spirit-filled person who pays attention and listens and mostly asks good questions. A mentor is someone who's proven and gifted and skilled. The mentor says, this is what we should work on. The coach says, what do you want to work on? The intervention person says, you're in so much trouble, let me save your life. But again, my point is that I'm drawing a parallel that one-on-one coaching is not as effective when things get hard as triad is because of the peer pressure. Remember I said it's one thing to make a promise to one person and then to tell them next time you didn't keep it. But if you make a promise to 3 people, it's harder to tell 3 people you didn't keep it.
All right, but in that case, you're not talking so much about coaching, it's more like consulting or intervention.
Well, I hope I didn't confuse it by putting it up there, because I'm saying this is new from Ron Shepard. I've not seen this anywhere.
Okay.
And so I'm saying that I think that there, in the beginning and some levels of stuff, I think one-on-one coaching is most effective. And in my opinion, triad coaching is more effective when things are plateauing or beginning to decline because of the greater accountability and the additional perspective and the additional help.
Okay, now I see it better.
Okay.
So intervention wouldn't have anything to do with coaching, actually. We're just talking about the triads for...
Pretty much, yeah. And again, I apologize if that confused.
No, just
But
talking
keep in
about
mind that
inheritance.
there's a time as a coach that it's better to step out of your role as a coach and save a marriage or save a ministry rather than say, I'm a coach, it's not my job.
Okay.
Other thoughts, questions, observations about this?
Jesus, he had a little kid, and he had a son.
Yeah.
So, the group of three, that's would be coaching.
Well, that was it was kind of a triad coaching. It was his inner circle. He could be more effective with three. And it's interesting, we think in terms of small groups that run 10 or 15, but Jesus had these three, Peter, James, and John, right?
Right.
And so Peter, called the rock, became the prototypical disciple. Not the rock of the church himself, Christ is the rock, but he was the prototypical disciple who was willing to take risks and was bold and courageous, except when he was disobedient and he was a coward. And so he's a typical disciple, and he's a special spokesperson, he's a typical disciple. And it's good to see that he was part of that inner circle. John, who rested on Jesus' breast, the one whom he loved, etc. So there was something about Jesus being with three people, even though he was known for his 12 disciples.
What I'm thinking about Barnabas, one-on-one,
Uh-huh.
and the first with Paul,
Mm-hmm.
Esau,
Yeah.
and then Paul, he got the same with Titus,
Yeah.
and
Timothy. Yeah.
So,
And again, we are not advocating that you only do triad coaching. We're saying that this has been effective where one-on-one coaching has not been as effective. So it's something that you need to think about and consider if it suits your context in your situation. Again, we're not telling you how to coach, we're telling you how you could coach.
So accountability is one of the key benefits you think that comes with triad.
Yeah, let's go ahead and shift into that. I think we're kind of at that point.
Yeah.
What are the strengths and weaknesses of triad coaching? And we're not just talking about coaching, we're specifically talking about triad coaching. So, strengths and weaknesses. And Brian is right. I think one of the great strengths is accountability. What are some other strengths and what are some weaknesses of triad coaching, would you guess?
Weakness, less personal.
It's just exactly what I was hoping someone would say. Yeah, it can be less personal. Typically, instead of a 40 or 50-minute coaching session, you might have an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes, and with 4 people there, you have less time, and it's going to be less personal. What are some other strengths or weaknesses of triad coaching?
So it strikes me too that if you're all in the same vision, that people learn from each other, so they're not just learning from you. So there's more accountability, but there's community learning or
Yeah.
cross-learning, cross-pollination.
Yeah, I would say greater, I think your word is greater, community learning. I would think that a weakness of it is that it takes more time and sometimes involves greater distances. May not, but it could involve greater distances.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean by greater distances?
Well, let's say that you're coaching 3 planters or pastors and they live in different cities.
Oh, in actual
Yeah.
geographic
Yeah.
locations. Okay.
Could it be less, that you might feel more uncomfortable? There is not so much privacy.
Confidentiality.
Yeah.
So confidentiality might become an issue?
It could be, yeah.
But Steven said the opposite, because you just shared that you felt more comfortable by being in a group. That's what you did, didn't you?
Yeah, I think there's the kind of both ways to look at it. Sometimes it encourages you to open up more when you have other people opening up and seeing that. And once you establish that trust relationship within that circle, then I think then you don't undermine the confidentiality. But if you don't know them too well,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a different dynamic going on, and then perhaps you would be less inclined to share openly. But I think when Ron did this, I mean, this was a pastoral peer group who serve at the same location. We're seeing all the time together. In fact, when Ron stopped, engaging on a regular basis, Jason and we talked about, hey, let's meet again. We like that, So, we're trying to get them moving forward.
So it planted a good seed,
Yeah.
I see.
But again, that was more, through that, there was a foundation that was built for the more trusting relationship
Right.
within that group.
And if I got put related to that, then it can make you more teachable by being in a group.
Teachable.
Okay? Not necessarily, but I think that's one thing that I've experienced.
You have different perspectives is a strength, so if it's just one-on-one,
Yeah.
it's the perspective pieces. Having different people speak into it, even if it's just people that deal with conflict.
Yeah. Well, I would even say that what I've experienced is that the mirror is held up better, and so it's easier for me as the coach, and it's easier for the coachees to grasp that they're being self-centered, self-loving, self-truthing at any given moment. That they're a little more fleshly. It's a little easier to spot when there's others saying, what's wrong with you today? And that happens.
What if you were to be triad coaching people that are planters from different churches, and you come to the point that you see that it's not really working, that there's more conflict than positive results? Would you stop it? Would you break it down to